The planet hung in the vast emptiness of space, its surface a patchwork of cracked deserts and lifeless oceans. It orbited a dying star that flickered like a candle on the verge of burning out. The world was cold, quiet, and forgotten by most of the galaxy. This was where the Zaeliths lived, or rather, survived. Once proud and advanced, their civilization had crumbled into ruin. Their cities were now crumbling ruins, their skies empty of the ships that used to connect them to other worlds. They were alone. Centuries ago, the Zaeliths had been part of a thriving galactic community. They traded goods, shared knowledge, and forged alliances with dozens of other species. But those days felt like a distant memory now. One by one, their allies had abandoned them. Some left because they feared the instability spreading across the Zaelith homeworld. Others turned their backs when resources grew scarce, unwilling to share what little they had. Even the closest friends of the Zaeliths eventually walked away, leaving behind only silence and despair. Kalen stood at the edge of what was once his people's capital city. He was tall for a Zaelith, with pale blue skin that shimmered faintly under the dim light of their fading sun. His golden eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the sight of collapsed buildings and barren fields. As the leader of the Zaeliths, he carried the weight of his entire race on his shoulders. Every day brought new challenges, food shortages, failing infrastructure, and the constant struggle to keep hope alive among his people. Hope was hard to find these days. Kalen, a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Lyra, one of his advisors, approaching. Her expression was grim, as it often was these days. "We've received reports from the Southern District. The water filtration system has failed again. Without repairs, thousands will go without clean water." Kalen sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Repairs required materials they no longer had access to. Tools, spare parts, even basic supplies like metal and wiring were almost non-existent. Most of their technology was outdated, held together by sheer determination and makeshift fixes. "What do you want me to do, Lyra?" he asked wearily. "Tell me how I'm supposed to fix something when we don't have the means." Lyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. She wanted to offer solutions, but there weren't any left. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "But if we can't figure this out soon, we won't last much longer." Kalen nodded, though his mind was already racing. He knew the truth of her words. The Zaeliths were running out of time. Every failure, every broken machine pushed them closer to extinction. And yet, despite everything, he refused to give up. Not while there was still breath in his body. As Kalen and Lyra discussed their dwindling options, far above the planet's atmosphere, a ship drifted silently through the void. It was sleek and metallic, designed for long journeys through deep space. On board, the crew of the Stellar Horizon went about their duties, unaware of the tragedy unfolding below them. They were explorers, sent by Earth to chart uncharted regions of the galaxy. For months they had traveled from one system to another, collecting data and mapping stars. Their mission was simple: observe, document, and avoid interference. Captain Daniel Carter sat in the command chair of the bridge, staring at the glowing screens around him. He was a man in his late 40s, with graying hair and sharp features softened by years of leadership. Beside him, navigator Emily Dawson adjusted the controls, guiding the ship toward their next destination. The rest of the crew bustled quietly, each focused on their tasks. "Anything unusual showing up on scans?" Carter asked, breaking the calm hum of activity. Emily shook her head. "Nothing out of the ordinary so far, Captain. Just another dead-end system." She paused, then added, "Though there is a Class M planet nearby. Signs of past habitation, but no current activity detected." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Past habitation? Any idea who?" "No records match our database," Emily replied. "Could be remnants of an ancient civilization. Or maybe someone decided it wasn't worth sticking around." Carter considered this for a moment. Ancient ruins were always intriguing, but they rarely held immediate value. Still, something about the planet nagged at him. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was instinct. Either way, he couldn't shake the feeling that they should take a closer look. Set a course for the planet, he ordered. Let's see what we're dealing with. The stellar horizon descended through the thin atmosphere, its sensors scanning the surface for signs of life. At first glance, the planet seemed uninhabitable, dry, barren, and devoid of any recognizable structures. But as they moved closer, faint traces of artificial constructs appeared. Crumbling towers jutted out of the desert sands, and roads long, buried by time, hinted at a once thriving society. "What do you think, Captain?" asked Dr. Laura Bennett, the ship's medic. She stood beside Carter, her arms crossed as she studied the images on the main screen. "Looks like whoever lived here didn't leave on good terms. Or they didn't leave at all," Carter murmured. He turned to Communications Officer Ryan Mitchell. "Can we pick up any signals, anything at all?" Ryan tapped furiously at his console. "Nothing clear, sir. There's some residual energy readings, but nothing coherent. Could just be echoes from old tech." Carter frowned. If there was anyone left down there, they wouldn't last long without help. "Prepare a landing party," he said finally. "We'll go down and investigate." Hours later, the team touched down near the remains of what appeared to be a settlement. The air was thin but breathable, and the temperature was chilly but tolerable. Armed with scanners and recording devices, they began exploring the area cautiously. The silence was eerie, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath their boots. It wasn't long before they found evidence of survivors. In the shadow of a collapsed building, they discovered makeshift shelters fashioned from scraps of metal and fabric. Inside, they found tools, cooking utensils, and other signs of recent habitation. Whoever lived here was clearly struggling, but they were alive. "Over here," Laura called suddenly. She knelt beside a pile of debris, gently uncovering a small figure lying motionless underneath. It was a child, its pale blue skin marked with dirt and bruises. Its breathing was shallow, but it was alive. Carter crouched beside her, his expression grim. "Looks like they're in bad shape. Get the medkit ready." As Laura tended to the child, more figures emerged from the shadows. They were humanoid, with slender frames and luminous eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Their expressions were wary, their movements cautious. Clearly, they hadn't expected visitors. One of them stepped forward, a tall individual with an authoritative presence. He spoke in a language none of the humans understood, but his tone was firm yet measured. Ryan activated the translation device, which took a few moments to process the unfamiliar dialect. "We mean no harm," Carter said carefully, letting the translator do its work. "We are explorers from Earth. We saw your world and came to investigate." The Zalith leader studied them for a long moment before responding. "You are not like the others," he said slowly, his voice tinged with both suspicion and curiosity. "Why have you come?" "To learn," Carter replied simply, "and to help if we can." For the first time in years, Kalen allowed himself to feel a spark of hope. The air was tense as the humans and Zaliths faced each other. The Zalith leader, Kalen, stood tall, his golden eyes scanning the strangers who had come from the stars. His people gathered behind him, their faces a mix of fear and curiosity. They had seen few outsiders in recent years, and those who did arrive rarely stayed long enough to help. Most came seeking resources or information, only to leave when they realized how dire the situation truly was. Captain Daniel Carter stepped forward cautiously, ensuring his body language remained open and non-threatening. He spoke slowly, letting the translation device convert his words into the Zalith language. "We are explorers," he repeated. "We didn't know anyone still lived here until we arrived. We want to understand your situation and see if there's anything we can do." Kalen tilted his head slightly, studying Carter with a piercing gaze. There was something different about these newcomers. Their demeanor wasn't greedy or arrogant like so many others who had visited before abandoning them. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in helping. But after centuries of betrayal, Kalen found it hard to trust anyone, even beings who claimed goodwill. "Why should we believe you?" Kalen asked finally. His voice was calm but firm, carrying an undertone of skepticism. Many have promised aid in the past only to take what little we had left and vanish. Carter nodded, understanding the weight of Kalen's words. I can't erase what others have done to you, he admitted. All I can offer is honesty. We're explorers, not conquerors. If we can assist, we will. But we need to know more about your circumstances first. Kalen hesitated, glancing back at his people. Among them were elders leaning on walking sticks, mothers clutching frightened children, and workers whose hands bore the marks of endless labor. They all looked to him for guidance, their eyes filled with silent pleas. He knew time was running out. Without help, his people might not survive another season. Finally, Kalen turned back to Carter. Very well, he said. But know this, deception will not be tolerated. Show us your intentions quickly or leave us be. With that, Kalen gestured for the humans to follow him. He led them deeper into the settlement, where makeshift shelters clustered around a central square. Here, life continued despite the overwhelming odds. Children played quietly with broken toys, while adults worked tirelessly to repair damaged equipment or tend to small crops struggling to grow in poor soil. As they walked, Emily Dawson, the navigator, couldn't help but notice the resilience of the Zaeliths. Despite their hardships, they hadn't given up. She whispered to Laura Bennett, the medic, "It's incredible, isn't it? How they keep going even when everything seems hopeless." Laura nodded, her focus shifting between observing the surroundings and monitoring the health of the child she had treated earlier. They remind me of some communities back on Earth, places hit by disasters but refusing to surrender. It's inspiring. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell, the communications officer, kept his scanner active, gathering data on the environment and structures. His expression was unreadable, though his thoughts churned with unease. Helping the Zaeliths would require significant resources humanity itself often struggled to spare. Was it wise to intervene? Back aboard the Stellar Horizon, Lieutenant Kevin Harper voiced similar concerns during a meeting with Captain Carter. Harper was a pragmatic man in his early 30s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. He believed strongly in prioritizing humanity's needs above all else. "Sir, I understand the moral argument for helping them," Harper began, leaning against the wall of the briefing room. "But let's face it, our mission is exploration, not charity. If we divert supplies and manpower to save the Zaeliths, what does that mean for Earth? What happens when we run low ourselves?" Carter listened patiently, knowing Harper's perspective wasn't uncommon among the crew. Resources were finite, and every decision carried consequences. Still, he couldn't ignore the opportunity before them, or the ethical responsibility they faced. "I hear you, Lieutenant," Carter replied evenly. "But consider this. The Zaeliths aren't just another species, they're sentient beings fighting to survive. Turning our backs on them would make us no better than those who abandoned them in the first place. Besides, aiding them could benefit us too. Imagine what we might learn from their technology or culture." Harper frowned, unconvinced. "And what if helping them puts us at odds with other galactic powers? You heard Kalen. They've been betrayed by former allies. Who's to say someone won't come knocking on our door demanding answers?" Carter sighed, recognizing the complexity of the situation. "That's why we'll proceed carefully. For now, we gather information and assess their needs. Then we report back to Earth Command for further instructions. This isn't a decision we make lightly." While the debate raged aboard the ship, the ground team continued interacting with the Zaeliths. Kalen introduced them to key members of his community, including Lyra, his trusted advisor, and Torin, a skilled engineer who oversaw efforts to maintain vital systems. Both were wary of the humans but willing to cooperate. For now. Torin showed Ryan Mitchell the remnants of their power grid, explaining how it had once powered the entire city, but now barely kept essential functions operational. "If we don't find a way to restore full capacity soon," Torin said through the translator, "everything will collapse." Ryan examined the equipment closely, noting its advanced design despite its current state of disrepair. "This tech is impressive," he remarked. "With the right materials, we could probably get it working again." Torin's eyes lit up with cautious hope. You think you can fix it? Ryan hesitated, glancing at Carter for approval. Fixing the grid would require more than just technical expertise. It would demand resources the stellar horizon might not be able to spare. Still, he nodded. I'll do what I can. Elsewhere, Laura Bennett worked alongside Zalith healers, treating illnesses and injuries caused by malnutrition and exposure. The medical facilities were rudimentary, lacking even basic supplies like bandages and antibiotics. Yet the Zaliths had adapted remarkably well, using natural remedies and innovative techniques to care for their sick. One healer, a young woman named Sarah, watched Laura intently as she administered treatment to a frail elder. Your methods are strange, Sarah admitted, but effective. Where did you learn them? Laura smiled warmly. On my world, medicine evolves over time. We combine knowledge from many cultures to improve lives. Maybe someday we can share what we know with you. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, gratitude flickering in her eyes. That would be welcome. As the day wore on, bonds began forming between the humans and Zaliths. Small acts of kindness, a shared meal, a repaired tool, a moment of laughter, broke down barriers and built trust. Even Harper, who had initially opposed involvement, found himself moved by the resilience of the Zaliths. Watching them struggle yet persevere stirred something within him, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet. By evening, the humans returned to the stellar horizon to debrief. The mood on the bridge was somber but determined. Everyone agreed. The Zaliths needed help, and humanity had the means to provide it, at least partially. But the question remained, would Earth Command approve such an intervention? Captain Carter addressed his crew, his tone steady and resolute. We've seen what's happening down there, he said. We've met people who refuse to give up, even when the odds are stacked against them. That kind of courage deserves respect and support. Tomorrow we'll transmit our findings to Earth Command and await their decision. Until then, we prepare to assist however we can. The crew dispersed, each member lost in their own thoughts. Some felt inspired by the Zalith's perseverance, while others worried about the potential risks. Yet one thing was certain. Humanity stood at a crossroads. Would they choose compassion over caution? Only time would tell. Back on Earth, the transmission from the stellar horizon sparked a whirlwind of activity. The report reached Earth Command late at night, but within minutes, key decision-makers were summoned to an emergency meeting. The room buzzed with tension as officials reviewed the data and listened to Captain Carter's message. It painted a vivid picture of the Zalith's plight, a once great civilization now clinging to survival, betrayed by former allies and abandoned by those who could have helped. The debate began almost immediately. Around the large oval table, representatives argued passionately, their voices rising and falling like waves. Some saw the situation as an opportunity, a chance to showcase humanity's compassion and ingenuity on a galactic scale. Others viewed it as a dangerous gamble, one that could strain Earth's already limited resources and provoke conflict with other species. General Marcus Cole was among the loudest voices against intervention. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s with graying hair and a stern expression, Cole had spent decades climbing the ranks of Earth's military. He believed firmly in protecting humanity's interests above all else. This isn't our fight, Cole said sharply, slamming his fist on the table for emphasis. We're talking about committing manpower, supplies, and technology to save a dying race. What do we get in return? Nothing but risk. Other species will see this as weakness, and they'll exploit it. Across the table, Samantha Hughes leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with conviction. Samantha was a civilian activist known for her advocacy of interstellar diplomacy. She had spent years campaigning for policies that prioritized cooperation over isolationism. Her voice was calm but firm as she countered Cole's argument. With respect, General, this isn't just about what we gain. It's about who we are, Samantha replied. If we turn our backs on the Zaliths, we become no better than those who abandoned them. This is our chance to show the galaxy that humanity stands for something more than selfishness and fear. Compassion is not weakness. It's strength. Her words resonated with some members of the council, particularly Dr. Alan Peterson, a scientist specializing in xenobiology. Peterson adjusted his glasses as he spoke, his tone measured but enthusiastic. From a practical standpoint, aiding, the Zaliths could benefit us immensely. Their technology is advanced even in its current state. By working together, we might unlock innovations that could improve life on Earth. Isn't that worth considering? Cole scoffed, shaking his head. You're dreaming, Doctor. Helping them won't come cheap, and there's no guarantee they'll share anything useful. Besides, what happens when another crisis arises? Where does it end? Samantha didn't back down. It ends when we decide to stop being afraid of doing the right thing. Look at public opinion. The majority of people want us to help. They see this as a defining moment for humanity. Are you really willing to ignore their voices? The mention of public opinion struck a nerve. News of the Zalith situation had leaked to the media shortly after the Stellar Horizons transmission arrived. Images of the struggling alien civilization, combined with reports of their abandonment by others, ignited outrage across the globe. Protests erupted outside government buildings demanding action. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like "Help the Zaliths" and "Compassion over fear." Ordinary citizens called into news programs, sharing stories of times humanity itself had been helped by outsiders during crises. One such story came from Maria Alvarez, a farmer from Argentina. During a severe drought years earlier, her community had received aid from an international relief organization. Without that assistance, she told reporters her family would have lost everything. "We owe it to the Zaliths to pay it forward," Maria said tearfully. "They're suffering and we have the power to make a difference." Even politicians who initially opposed intervention began feeling the pressure. Senator Robert Grant, a cautious moderate, found himself bombarded with calls and emails from constituents urging him to support aid efforts. At first he resisted, fearing the economic impact. But as the days passed, he realized ignoring public sentiment could cost him dearly, in votes and credibility. "I never thought I'd say this," Grant admitted during a private conversation with Samantha Hughes. "But maybe the people are right. Maybe we need to take a stand even if it's risky." Meanwhile, aboard the Stellar Horizon, Captain Carter and his crew waited anxiously for Earth Command's response. The delay weighed heavily on everyone, especially Laura Bennett, who couldn't stop thinking about the sick and injured Zaliths she had treated. Each passing hour felt like a lifetime. "We should start preparing supplies anyway," Laura suggested during a meeting in the ship's mess hall. "If Earth gives us the go-ahead, we'll be ready to act immediately." Ryan Mitchell, ever pragmatic, shook his head. "And if they don't, then we've wasted valuable resources we might need later. We can't afford to jump the gun." Laura frowned, frustrated by Ryan's reluctance. "Every second we wait, someone down there suffers. Do you really think sitting around debating ethics is going to change that?" Before Ryan could respond, Kevin Harper chimed in, surprising everyone. Since arriving on the Zalith homeworld, Harper had grown quieter, observing more than speaking. But now, his voice carried a hint of bitterness. "Maybe we're looking at this wrong," he said. "What if helping the Zaliths isn't just about saving them? What if it's also about proving something to ourselves? That we're capable of more than survival? That we can rise above our fears and do what's right?" His words hung in the air, leaving the group silent. Even Carter seemed taken aback by Harper's sudden philosophical turn. For a man who had once argued so vehemently against involvement, this shift was unexpected and telling. Finally, Carter broke the silence. "Whatever Earth decides, we'll follow orders," he said firmly. "But until then, let's focus on what we can control. Laura, work with the medical team to prioritize treatments. Ryan, keep assessing their infrastructure needs, and Harper—" He paused, locking eyes with the lieutenant. "Keep thinking about why we're here. Sometimes that's the most important question of all." As the crew dispersed, each member returned to their tasks with renewed purpose. They knew the final decision rested with Earth Command, but they also understood that their actions in the meantime mattered. Every interaction with the Zaeliths, every effort to ease their suffering brought them closer to building trust, and perhaps changing the course of history. Hours turned into days as the stellar horizon maintained regular contact with Earth. Command, providing updates and additional data to support their case. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a response arrived. The message was brief but clear. Earth Command authorizes limited humanitarian aid to the Zaeliths, contingent upon mutual cooperation and the sharing of technological knowledge. Further instructions to follow. Carter read the message aloud to his crew, his voice steady but tinged with relief. Cheers erupted from some, while others exchanged quiet smiles. Though the mission ahead would be challenging, they had been given permission to act, to step forward and offer hope where none existed before. For the first time since discovering the Zaeliths, Captain Daniel Carter allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had chosen compassion over caution. Now it was up to them to prove that choice was the right one. The message from Earth Command brought a mix of emotions aboard the stellar horizon. For Captain Daniel Carter and his crew, it was both a relief and a responsibility. They had been granted permission to help the Zaeliths, but with conditions. The aid would be limited, and in return, the Zaeliths were expected to share their advanced knowledge willingly. While this arrangement seemed fair on paper, Carter knew it wouldn't sit well with everyone. Trust had to be earned, especially after centuries of betrayal. Kalen, the Zaelith leader, listened carefully as Carter explained the terms through the translation device. His golden eyes narrowed slightly, betraying a flicker of unease. "You ask us to give up secrets," he said slowly, his tone measured but tinged with suspicion. "How do we know you won't use them against us?" Carter understood the weight of Kalen's concern. After being abandoned by so many allies, the Zaeliths had every reason to doubt outsiders. Yet humanity couldn't afford to act purely out of charity. Resources were finite, and Earth needed assurance that this mission would benefit both sides. "We're not asking for everything at once," Carter replied calmly. "Only what you're willing to share. Our goal is to work together, to rebuild your world while learning from each other. If we succeed, it will strengthen both our peoples." Kalen hesitated, glancing back at his advisors. Lyra stood quietly beside him, her expression thoughtful. Torin, the engineer, nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on the ground. Despite their hardships, the Zaeliths were survivors, and they recognized an opportunity when they saw one. Still, old. Wounds ran deep. Finally, Kalen spoke. "Very well," he said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "We will cooperate, but know this: if you break your word, there will be consequences." The agreement marked the beginning of a fragile alliance. Over the next few days, the humans and Zaeliths worked side by side, tackling immediate challenges. Laura Bennett focused on improving medical care, teaching Zaelith healers basic techniques and improvising treatments with the limited supplies available. Sarah, the young healer, proved to be a quick learner, eagerly absorbing everything Laura shared. "This remedy you showed me, it works wonders," Sarah said one evening as she treated a child suffering from a respiratory infection. Her hands moved deftly, applying a salve made from ingredients Laura had identified during their earlier surveys. "Thank you. Without your help, I don't think we could have saved her." Laura smiled warmly, though her heart ached knowing how much more needed to be done. "You're welcome," she replied. "But remember, healing isn't just about medicine. It's about hope. Keep believing in yourselves and you'll get through this." Elsewhere, Ryan Mitchell teamed up with Torin to repair the damaged power grid. Together, they scoured the ruins for usable parts, cobbling together makeshift solutions where necessary. Ryan marveled at the ingenuity of the Zaelith technology, even in its deteriorated state. "This design is incredible," he remarked as he examined a piece of machinery. "If we can restore full functionality, it could power half the city." Torin nodded, his pride evident despite the grim circumstances. "Our ancestors built this system to last generations," he explained. "But without proper maintenance, it began to fail. Your expertise may be what saves it." Ryan felt a pang of guilt as he realized how much the Zaliths had lost, not just material wealth but faith in themselves. He resolved to do whatever it took to help them reclaim their former glory. While progress was being made on the ground, tensions simmered aboard the stellar horizon. Lieutenant Kevin Harper remained skeptical of the mission, though his initial hostility had softened somewhat. Watching the Zaliths struggle yet persevere had planted seeds of doubt in his mind. Could humanity truly afford to turn its back on such resilience? Harper voiced his concerns during a private conversation with Emily Dawson, the navigator. "I still think we're spreading ourselves too thin," he admitted, pacing the narrow corridor outside the bridge. "Earth has problems of its own. Hunger, disease, wars. How can we justify helping aliens when our own people are suffering?" Emily crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "It's not about choosing one over the other," she replied. "Helping the Zaliths doesn't mean neglecting Earth. In fact, it might make things better in the long run. Think about the technology we could gain, advancements that could solve some of our biggest challenges." Harper frowned, unconvinced. "And what if it backfires? What if we invest all this time and effort only to end up worse off than before?" "I don't have all the answers," Emily admitted. "But I do know one thing. Doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, we have a chance to make a difference for them and for us." Her words lingered in Harper's mind long after their conversation ended. Though he still harbored doubts, he couldn't deny the logic behind her argument. Perhaps compassion wasn't as reckless as he'd once believed. Back on the surface, cultural exchanges between humans and Zaliths grew more frequent. Meals became shared experiences, with each side introducing the other to traditional dishes. The Zaliths served a savory stew made from local plants, while the humans offered nutrient-rich rations brought from the ship. These simple moments fostered understanding and camaraderie, bridging gaps that language alone couldn't close. One evening, under the dim glow of the dying star, Kalen invited Carter and a few members of the crew to join him for a storytelling session. Gathered around a small fire, the Zalith leader recounted tales of his people's past, their achievements, their struggles, and their dreams for the future. His voice carried a quiet dignity, painting vivid images of a civilization that had once thrived among the stars. "When we first reached out to other species, we believed we were building bridges," Kalen said, his gaze distant. "But those bridges crumbled when times got tough. Now we find ourselves standing alone, wondering if anyone truly cares." Carter listened intently, moved by the raw honesty in Kalen's words. "Not everyone turns away," he said gently. "Sometimes it takes courage to step forward and offer a hand. That's what we're trying to do here." Kalen studied Carter for a moment, then nodded. "Perhaps you are different," he said, softly. "Time will tell." As the night wore on, laughter and music filled the air. Zalith musicians played haunting melodies on stringed instruments, while human crew members joined in with songs from Earth. For a brief moment, the hardships of the present faded, replaced by a sense of unity and possibility. Despite these positive developments, challenges persisted. Supplies dwindled faster than anticipated, forcing Carter to ration carefully. Equipment failures delayed critical repairs, testing the patience of both humans and Zaliths. And lingering distrust occasionally flared into arguments, reminding everyone of the fragile nature of their alliance. Yet through it all, progress continued. Slowly but surely, the power grid stabilized, providing enough energy to revive essential systems. Medical treatments reduced illness rates, giving the Zaliths renewed strength to face their daily struggles. Most importantly, trust began to take root, a fragile but vital foundation upon which a brighter future could be built. Captain Carter reflected on these changes during a quiet moment aboard the stellar horizon. Standing on the observation deck, he gazed out at the Zalith homeworld below, its surface bathed in the faint light of its fading sun. Humanity had taken a bold step, choosing compassion over caution. Whether it would lead to triumph or tragedy remained uncertain. But, for now, hope burned brightly, a beacon guiding two vastly different species toward a shared destiny. As the days turned into weeks, the fragile partnership between humanity and the Zaliths grew stronger. Progress was slow but steady, with each side contributing what they could to rebuild the shattered remnants of the alien civilization. The I-Die humans brought tools, knowledge, and determination, while the Zaliths offered their resilience, ingenuity, and deep understanding of their own world. Together they were beginning to turn the tide against despair. But not everyone aboard the Stellar Horizon shared the same enthusiasm for the mission. Lieutenant Kevin Harper still harbored doubts about the wisdom of helping the Zaliths, though he kept his thoughts largely to himself. He watched as resources dwindled and the crew worked tirelessly, often risking their own safety to assist their new allies. To Harper, it felt like a reckless gamble, one that could leave Earth vulnerable if things went wrong. One evening, after another long day of repairs and medical aid, Harper found himself alone in the ship's storage bay. Rows of crates lined the walls containing food, medicine, and spare parts meant to sustain both the crew and the Zaliths. As he stared at the dwindling supplies, frustration bubbled inside him. "This isn't sustainable," he muttered under his breath. "We're giving everything we have, and for what? A dying race that might collapse anyway?" Harper's mind raced with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he couldn't deny the Zaliths' courage or the potential benefits of their technology. On the other, he feared the cost of failure. What if Earth needed those supplies later? What if this mission drained resources that could have been used to help humanity itself? In that moment of doubt, Harper made a decision, a choice driven by fear and self-preservation. Moving quickly, he accessed the inventory system and rerouted several crates of critical supplies to a hidden compartment within the ship. These included advanced medical kits, power cells essential for repairing the Zalith infrastructure, and nutrient-rich rations intended for the most vulnerable members of the alien population. If anyone asked, Harper planned to claim the items had been misplaced or damaged during transit. The next morning, chaos erupted when the missing supplies were discovered. Captain Carter called an emergency meeting in the briefing room, his face grim as he addressed the crew. "Someone tampered with our stockpile last night," he said, his voice low but firm. "Critical supplies are gone, supplies we promised to deliver to the Zaliths. Whoever did this has jeopardized not only our mission but also the trust we've worked so hard to build." The room fell silent as the weight of Carter's words sank in. Eyes darted around the table, suspicion hanging heavy in the air. No one spoke, but Harper avoided meeting anyone's gaze, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Laura Bennett broke the silence, her voice trembling with anger. "How could this happen?" she demanded. "Those supplies were meant for children, for people who are starving and sick. Without them, lives will be lost." Ryan Mitchell nodded, his expression dark. "And it sends a message to the Zaliths that we can't be trusted. After everything they've been through, how do you think they'll react?" Carter held up a hand to quiet the rising voices. "I understand your concerns," he said, "but pointing fingers won't solve this. Right now, we need to focus on damage control. Laura, work with Sarah and the healers to stretch the remaining supplies as far as possible. Ryan, prioritize repairs that don't require the stolen equipment. And someone, anyone, if you know something, speak up. This isn't just about us, it's about the lives depending on us." The meeting ended with no clear answers, leaving the crew uneasy and divided. Harper kept his head down, avoiding eye contact as he slipped away from the group. Guilt gnawed at him, but he convinced himself he'd done what was necessary to protect Earth, to ensure humanity's survival. Yet deep down he knew he'd crossed a line. Meanwhile, news of the missing supplies reached Kalen and the Zalith leadership. When Carter delivered the message, Kalen's golden eyes flashed with anger and betrayal. "You promised us help," he said, his voice cold. "Now you take back what little you gave? Is this how your people honor agreements?" Carter winced at the accusation, feeling the sting of shame. "Kalen, I swear to you, this wasn't authorized." Someone sabotaged our efforts. I don't know why or how, but I'm doing everything I can to fix it. Please believe me." For a moment, Kalen said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep sigh, he shook his head. "Trust is fragile, Captain. Once broken, it's hard to mend. But for now, we will wait. Prove to us that this was an isolated act, not a sign of things to come." With tensions running high, Carter doubled down on efforts to repair the damage. He assigned extra patrols to monitor the supply bays and tasked Emily Dawson with reviewing security logs for any clues. The entire crew worked overtime, determined to show the Zaeliths that the sabotage didn't reflect humanity's true intentions. It was Emily who eventually uncovered the truth. Late one night, while reviewing surveillance footage, she noticed a figure entering the storage bay during the time frame of the theft. At first, the image was blurry, but after enhancing the recording, the identity of the saboteur became clear: Lieutenant Kevin Harper. Emily hesitated, unsure of what to do. Harper was a respected member of the crew, known for his discipline and loyalty to Earth's interests. Confronting him would mean accusing a colleague of betrayal, a serious charge that could fracture the team further. Still, she knew she couldn't stay silent. The next morning, Emily approached Captain Carter privately. "Sir, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone urgent. "It's about the missing supplies." Carter looked up from his desk, sensing the gravity in her voice. "What is it?" "I reviewed the security footage," Emily explained. "It wasn't easy to spot, but it was Harper. He took the supplies." Carter's jaw tightened as the revelation sank in. Of all the possibilities, this was the last thing he expected. Harper had always been vocal about his opposition to the mission, but sabotage? It seemed unthinkable. "Are you certain?" Carter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded. "I triple-checked the footage. There's no mistake." Carter dismissed Emily, thanking her for her diligence. Alone in his quarters, he wrestled with the implications. Punishing Harper severely would send a strong message, reinforcing the importance of integrity and teamwork. But it would also create division among the crew at a time when unity was crucial. Alternatively, rehabilitating Harper could restore trust, but only if Harper was willing to change. After much deliberation, Carter decided on a middle path. He summoned Harper to the bridge, where the rest of the senior staff waited. Harper entered hesitantly, his face pale as he realized what was coming. "Lieutenant Harper," Carter began, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. "We know what you did. You stole supplies meant for the Zaeliths, supplies that could have saved lives. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Harper opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. Denial wouldn't help now. The evidence was undeniable. Finally, he sighed and looked down. "I thought I was protecting us," he admitted quietly. "Protecting Earth. I didn't want to see us waste resources on a lost cause." Carter leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "A lost cause, that's not your call to make. We're here because humanity chose compassion over fear, because we believed we could make a difference. Your actions betrayed that belief and nearly destroyed the trust we've built with the Zaeliths." Harper flinched, the weight of his mistake crashing over him. For the first time, he saw the harm he'd caused, not just to the Zaeliths, but to his own crew and principals. "So what happens now?" Harper asked, his voice barely audible. "You'll remain part of this mission," Carter replied. "But you'll report directly to me, and your duties will include working alongside the Zaeliths. You'll see firsthand the impact of your choices, and maybe learn something about the people you judged so harshly." Harper nodded, accepting the punishment without argument. Though humiliated, he understood it was fair. More importantly, he sensed it was an opportunity, a chance to redeem himself and confront the fears that had driven him to sabotage. Over the following days, Harper immersed himself in the daily struggles of the Zaeliths. He helped distribute food rations, assisted with repairs, and even spent time listening to their stories. Slowly, he began to see them not as statistics or burdens, but as individuals fighting to survive against impossible odds. Their resilience inspired him, challenging his assumptions and forcing him to question his earlier beliefs. One afternoon, while working alongside Torin to repair a water filtration system, Harper finally spoke his mind. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice sincere. "I let my fears get the better of me. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" Torin paused, considering the question. Then, with a small smile, he extended his hand. "Apology, accepted. But remember, actions matter more than words. Show us you've changed, and we'll trust you again." Harper shook Torin's hand, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful, not just for the Zaeliths, but for humanity's place in the galaxy. Perhaps redemption was possible, even in the face of mistakes. The sun set over the Zaelith homeworld, casting long shadows across the landscape. Captain Carter stood on the observation deck of the stellar horizon,